All right, 3 o'clock chat here. What's up, my friends? The NFL season will kick off on Thursday night, 5:20 on NBC and Peacock. The Cowboys will be at the Eagles. Philly has been set as an 8.5-point favorite. The New York Giants unofficially listed Jackson Dart as Russell Wilson's backup. The Giants will meet the Commanders on Sunday here on 620 Rip City Radio. The Mariners road trip continues today in Tampa, unfortunately. That first pitch at 4:35. Brian Wu will get the start for Seattle. M's 3 games back in the West. New AP poll is out. Ohio State is number 1 after their win over Texas. Oregon is 6th, and they got one first-place vote. The Ducks are going to host the Cowboys of Oklahoma State on Saturday. Oregon is a whopping 28.5-point favorite. Rip City Drive with Chad Doing is coming up next. We'll talk Beavs with Brendan Slaughter at 4:20. Our college football and NFL insider, Alex Brink, former Coug, at 5:20.
Live from the Coors Light Studios, it's time for the Rip City Drive, hosted by the crazy and often irrational Chad Doing.
Show me your beaver!
Coors Light, mountain cold refreshment. Choose chill.
12 seconds, 11 seconds, and counting down to play in the game. And I think the Beavers, they could, and they're just going to let it run out, Jimmy. Carson Boschman was part of the personnel package. The clock down to 0 in California with just a sparse crowd still remaining on this Saturday night at Reeser. Comes in and stuns, I think, the fans and the Beavs by the dominating nature of the victory. Final score, California 34, the Beavers 15.
Strap in. The Rip City Drive with Chad Doing starts now.
Well, it's great to hear the voice of Mike Parker back on football games with our first full weekend of college football. Woo! It was so awesome to be able to sit back on Saturday and watch nonstop football, and that led into Sunday with Miami and Notre Dame, which was a sensational football game. And then last night we saw Bill Belichick get depantsed on national television by TCU. What a weekend it was. So many great things to talk about. It's going to be very difficult to stay focused when I've got like a billion different football-related topics I want to talk about. Alex Brink, former Coug with E4 Sports, our college football and NFL insider, is going to join us coming up at 5:20 today. I cannot wait to talk to Alex Brink, and he'll join us every week throughout the entire football season. And Brendan Slaughter is going to stop by from Beaver's Edge to talk Beavs coming off the opening loss to Cal. He'll join me in studio at 4:20. If you want to reach out to me, you could do so on X at Chad and Rip City. You can hit me direct with a text at 360-281-5473. And you can participate in the program if you want, 503-248-0620. I'd love to get your take on what you saw this weekend. What jumped out to you in the first weekend of college football? Call me now, 503-248-0620. You can also podcast and listen live via our free iHeartRadio app. And you can find us on YouTube at youtube.com, Rip City Radio 620. And we stream all of our local shows there. And you can pull up old shows. It's all there. So I want to talk a lot of football today. I am absolutely jacked. We are now in September, and we're just a couple of days away from the launch of the NFL season. And we got a full launch of college football this past weekend. It was great. I want to start with the Oregon Ducks. I talked a lot about the Ducks and some of my expectations and what I was looking for with this season, and we saw a lot of that on Saturday in the win over Montana State. I mean, Oregon's offense was in perfect working order on Saturday. Now, I understand it's Montana State, but that's exactly how an opener like that against that team should look like. Smooth. I mean, the Ducks look good. And I was talking with someone earlier today. If you look at their offensive line, the type of guys that Dan Lanning is bringing in. I talked about the defensive tackles, but look at that offensive line and look at the job they did. Dante Moore was able to operate without pressure throughout the course of the entire game. And when you talk about balance in the offense, and this is one of my biggest keys of this upcoming season for the Ducks, was to rediscover that ground game, to be able to run the football, to be able to line up and provide that balance that we've seen for years at Oregon. Well, they had that on Saturday. You know, last year they struggled to run the football. I think they averaged about 4.5 yards a carry. That's paltry for a team like Oregon. but you couldn't ask for better balance than what we saw on Saturday. They had 253 yards passing, and they had 253 yards rushing. That's perfect balance. And they were in control from start until finish, and Dante Moore was very smooth. 18 of 23, had a few touchdowns, and just ran it the way he was supposed to run it. The offense, the operation, the decision-making. He looked comfortable out there. And the advantage for Dante Moore, I give him credit because he went to UCLA after he started at Oregon, had a chance to play as a youngster and work under Chip Kelly, and then that situation went sideways, and he wound up back at Oregon. And this time he's able to sit back, take a year, and learn from Dylan Gabriel, have a chance to digest the offense of Will Levis, and then from that, he was able to take over this year as starter. Now, as I mentioned last week, I'm excited for Dante Moore because I think he has a chance to be just as good or even better than the previous two quarterbacks. And that's saying something in Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel. But he has that type of talent and that type of skill set and that type of athleticism. I think Will Levis, in so many different ways this year with Dante Moore, is going to be able to really open up the playbook. And that's because of Moore's unique talents and his arm strength. I think they'll be able to stretch the defense. They're going to be able to run the football, and he'll put more stress on the defense with his legs. And Dante Moore looked good. And this is exactly what you want if you're Oregon right now. Get on the field, take care of the early season business, and get your operation oiled up and ready to roll for Penn State later in September. And I think we saw over the weekend, Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon are the three teams to beat in the Big Ten. Those are the three teams. There's only 2 spots in the Big Ten title game, and it's going to come from 2 of those 3 teams, Oregon, Penn State, and Ohio State. But Oregon, if you're a Duck fan, you've got to feel really good about what you saw. No problems with the offensive line early, even though they have a lot of new faces coming in. The defense was able to control the line of scrimmage, and Dante Moore was terrific. I think there's always a little bit of apprehension with the unknown. And Dante Moore, we believe that he's good. We know that he's talented, but you didn't really know what to expect until you saw it. And then all of a sudden you see Dante Moore with the cast of characters he's got around him. And I'm just impressed and continue to be impressed with the way Dan Lanning is operating that program, with his relentless energy when it comes to recruiting, with the youth and energy of his entire staff, and the way they approach the game. And Dan Lanning is intense. He's not afraid to speak his mind, and he knows how to motivate his players. And what's unique about Lanning is that he came from Georgia, and yet he's been able to come in and blend in on the West Coast and really has done a heck of a job at Oregon. And he's just continued to build what the coaches before him have laid down. But Lanning's got this group ready. They look good. They look real good, and we'll see how things progress. They got Oklahoma State coming to town this weekend. Oklahoma State is young. Oklahoma State is in a bit of a rebuilding period under Coach Gundy. Oregon's favored by 28.5. They should have no problems disposing of the Cowboys coming up on Saturday. That was impressive. So big props to Oregon, and most importantly, Dante Moore for stepping in and just really taking off and looking really good. And that offense didn't miss a beat. In fact, it looked better to me coming off what they did last year with Dylan Gabriel. Dante Moore looks legit. I can't wait to see more of him and to see how Will Levis utilizes him, and I want to see him against better competition. But when you're playing Montana State, you want it to be as smooth as that, and that's exactly what they got. Elsewhere, other things that jumped out at me. I think we learned a couple of important lessons with Bill Belichick and Arch Manning. Arch Manning looked awful in that game Saturday morning against Ohio State. It was awful. The first half was basically unwatchable. Arch Manning couldn't complete a pass. Arch Manning didn't look comfortable. He never set his feet, and his mechanics appeared to be wildly off. And I guess the question is, why didn't we discuss more about that going into the game? The story on Arch Manning, of course, is that he never really played a lot of stiff competition in high school. He's only got a little bit of playing time under his belt at the University of Texas against inferior competition. And he's making his first real start as the Texas starting quarterback at Ohio State against the defending national champs, against one of the best teams in the country with a lot of legit defensive players, and Matt Patricia one of Bill Belichick's disciples as their defensive coordinator. And you could see early on, he looked confused, he wasn't comfortable, and he just never got settled. And yet Texas was right there with the chance to get back into that game late. But Arch Manning, I guess my biggest concern about Arch, it's not the fact that he lost the game. It's not the fact that he threw an interception, but just the mechanics. The ball's being thrown low and skipping at receivers' feet. Arch Manning, some weird arm movements. And again, I'm not a quarterback guru. I'm not a quarterback coach. But I've watched enough football that when I see something that looks abnormal or a little bit awkward, it jumps out at me. And that's what I saw with Arch. And the hype around Arch Manning going into that game was a bit much. But that wasn't something that he generated. That wasn't something that his family generated. That came from fans and the media. And it's because he's got the last name Manning. We instantly, in our minds, think, oh, Arch Manning. He's related to Peyton Manning and Archie Manning and Eli Manning. He's got to be good. So I think what we learned here is that just because someone's got a name or just because everybody believes someone's going to be good, playing quarterback is the most difficult job in sport. And you've got to get out there in the field and prove it. You've got to show that you can get the job done. There's so many different things that go into it that you have to get on the field and prove it. And I'm not going to jump off the ship after one game. I don't know if Arch Manning's going to be a number one pick in the NFL draft or not. I don't know if Arch Manning's going to be a great college quarterback. I just know I need more time to see it. But what I saw on Saturday was a young quarterback with no experience who looked uncomfortable, and his mechanics appeared to be way off. And we'll talk with Alex Brink about that because he knows quarterbacks and he coaches quarterbacks. What was going on with Archie Manning in that game against Ohio State? Now, on the other side, with Julian saying, the Buckeyes' new starting quarterback, I like the way he played. He was calm. He made good decisions. And Ryan Day was very conservative, and I think it's simply because he knew his defense had total control of the game, that Arch Manning was uncomfortable, and if we just don't make a big mistake, we're going to win this game. And so they had a conservative game plan by design to make sure that that defense was in a position to win it for them. But Sayan made all the plays he had to make. He managed the game really well, and I think Ohio State's in good hands. And I know a lot of people were frustrated with Steve Sarkisian for having a very conservative, vanilla-type game plan with Archie Manning. But I think what happened is early in the game, with the way Archie was delivering the football and how uncomfortable he looked, I don't think Sarkisian had confidence that he could open it up. Now, I'll give Arch credit. He did a good job of bouncing back. He made a couple of plays late in the game through the touchdown down the right sideline, made a big play down the left sideline to put them in position to possibly tie the game. They ended up turning it over on downs, but Archie continued to battle even though he was in over his head and he was struggling out there. It was tough to watch. How about Alabama getting whacked by Florida State? And Kalen DeBoer now being on the hot seat at Bama. The problem is his buyout's almost $70 million. And in today's new world of the NIL, schools cannot afford to pay $70 million to buy somebody out and then go spend another $100 million on a new coach and his staff. That's not going to happen. Can Kalen DeBoer figure it out? But that team looked lost. And I think the reality is starting to set in, or at least maybe now Bama fans are considering the idea that life without Nick Saban is going to be a lot harder than what they thought. And that's what happens when you go from the best coach in the history of the game to anybody else, because it's not going to be the same. So I've got some thoughts on Kalen DeBoer and why he might be struggling at Alabama. All right, Alex Brink going to join us at 5:20. We'll dive into the Beavs and that loss to Cal with Brendan Slaughter at 4:20. You got the Rip City Drive on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, I think I may have made an error in my first segment. I think I was referring to the Oregon offensive coordinator, Will Stein, as Will Levis. I think that's what I did. Someone texted me and said Will Stein. And I don't know why I have a tendency to say Will Levis, but this is what happens when you watch a lot of games and you see a lot of coaches and you see a lot of different players. After a while, after years and years of doing this, sometimes the names get all mixed up in my mind. So my apologies. I'm a big fan of Will Stein, the Oregon offensive coordinator. And as I said before, I think he's going to be able to open up his playbook in ways that we have not seen previously because of the talents and the unique skill set of Dante Moore. He was very impressive in that opener against Montana State. I'm excited to see what Moore can do as they continue to move forward. The good thing is, when that game at Penn State arrives, he's already had plenty of time under center as a starter. So it's not like this is a brand new year where you're trying to break in a new quarterback like Notre Dame or pick your spot or being Texas with Arch Manning. Dante Moore has been there, and he's got experience. And that's very helpful because he's not going to be surprised by a lot of the different things he might see from an opposing team's defense when he's out there on the field. And I think that's critical. Now, the other big story over the weekend, and there were multiple big stories, but how about Alabama getting worked as a 2-touchdown favorite on the road by Florida State, a team that won just 2 games last year? Now, I think that was a bit of a outlier of a season for Mike Norvell. Norvell's proven that he is a very good college coach, and not only that, but he's been able to amass some talent. That team 2 years ago that got punked and did not get into the playoff because of the injury to Jordan Travis, their quarterback, that team had a lot of NFL players. Just take a look at that roster and look and see how many guys are playing in big-time spots with multiple teams in the NFL. I mean, Mike Norvell knows what he's doing, and Mike Norvell has already beaten multiple big-time coaches during his time as a head coach. So I think Mike Norvell knows what he's doing, and you can look at the rebuilding effort and some of the guys they brought in and the work they did on Saturday in that beatdown of Alabama. They dominated the line of scrimmage. They controlled the game from start until finish, and they never let up. Like Alabama, after that first touchdown drive, they were done. Like literally done. They had nothing. And Florida State had all the answers. They had the energy. They were more aggressive. They were the more physical football team. That impressed the heck out of me. 2-touchdown underdog, getting the win outright and dominating Alabama. So the question is, what's wrong? The big stat that was being thrown around over the weekend was Kalen DeBoer's lost to 4 unranked teams, and he hasn't even been at Bama for 2 years. Nick Saban only lost to, I think, 4 during his entire tenure at Bama, or maybe it was 2. But clearly, DeBoer is not Saban, nor is he going to come anywhere close to matching Saban's run, because Saban is the greatest coach of all time. There's no question about that. And the way Saban was able to do it in the new age of college football is pretty impressive. But Kalen DeBoer, it's not like he forgot to coach or forgot how to coach. He's one of the most successful coaches in all of college football. And we saw what he did with Washington and Michael Penix, getting them to the championship game against Michigan in an unbeaten season. And they beat Oregon twice. Like Kalen DeBoer's had success at every single stop. So the question is, what's wrong? Because he's got more resources and better talent at Alabama than he's had at any other place where he's been. So why can't DeBoer figure it out? And I think it could come down to, personality. And I was thinking about this over the weekend. I remember one of my radio friends, John Lund, who worked in Portland for multiple years. Now he's down in the Bay Area. He told me, and he's moved around a little bit. He's worked in San Francisco, Portland, Utah, Dallas, but he also took a job in Detroit. And it didn't work out for him. And I asked him, I said, John, you've had success everywhere you've been. What happened in Detroit? And he said, well, the issue is that it's just a different mindset, a different culture. The people are different in Detroit. And the sports fans look at things differently than I do. And I said, well, how so? And he said, well, there, the weather is cold most of the year. People, generally speaking, in the Detroit area are not in the best of moods. And the sports fans, because of years of ineptitude, especially from the Detroit Lions, are never in a good mood because their teams are not good. The weather's cold outside, and they're angry about it. And they want to yell and be angry about it. And he said, my personality, being more of a West Coast guy, being a little more laid back and being jovial, it did not mesh well with the local fans in Detroit. And so he ended up moving on because Detroit was not a good fit for his personality. And so I was thinking about that this weekend because you look at Kalen DeBoer, his personality is the exact opposite when you compare him to Nick Saban. Nick Saban is the type of coach who is a yeller. He will get up in your face. He's super intense, and he's always focused on the mission at hand, and he will let you know when you're not doing it the way he wants it done. Now, I'm not saying that there's only one way to be a coach. There's multiple ways. But Nick Saban was a red ass, and Nick Saban was a guy who would always be on you if you weren't doing it the way he expected you to do it. And John Middlecoff, who is a former NFL scout and somebody I used to work with in the Bay Area, he said that, he's talked to people who have worked with Saban, that they actually enjoyed Saban's time at Bama because he was a dictator. And he would come in and just lay down the law and the expectations of what needed to be done. And the expectations. And that people, because they were having great success and everyone was making money, that they enjoyed Saban's rule as dictator because they knew exactly what needed to be done, what was expected of them, and they just proceeded like that. They enjoyed it. And Nick Saban was very demanding of his staff, of the personnel around him, his players, everything. He expected greatness, and he was pursuing championships. Now, with DeBoer, he's got more of a West Coast laid-back personality. He's not a dictator. He's not a screamer. He's not a yeller. He's not going to get up in your face. That's just not the way he operates. And I just wonder if going from someone like Saban to somebody like DeBoer, if it's just not a good personality match based on region, based on the way people operate in the South, based on the way football is done down in the South. Maybe DeBoer's not a good match. It's quite possible. Take a listen to DeBoer at his press conference today talking about a lack of effort from some of the players in that Florida State game that obviously jumped out pretty well on film.
It surprises you sometimes when it happens, especially with certain guys, because of the effort that they put in and day out. But I think there were some other things that come across as, hesitancy, as a way I kind of put it. And I think after the game, probably would follow that up and say that there was a couple times where we just got to be quicker to get to a spot and do our job. It might be setting an edge and just, again, hesitant with the communication, kind of confirming, or just, we believe and have that confidence in what we're doing. There really wasn't much. It was really, I think I spoke maybe that there was a couple looks that we hadn't really practiced. Well, I don't really feel like there was really that at all. After watching the film, I thought we did a good job preparing. I thought the guys had a great week. Now you just got to, translate the numbers that you see on the football field that were in different jerseys. And believe that scheme, those X's and O's that you saw in your week of preparation is who it is in a Florida State uniform. And, I think you saw it as the second half went along. They started really kind of getting into it, but it was too late. It just put us behind the 8 ball. Now you got to be perfect in everything you do. And put us in a spot where we had to play catch up. And on the road, that's certainly hard to do. And
all right, there's Kalen DeBoer. He sounds pretty nice, kind of laid back, not super intense, not anything like Nick Saban. So I'm just wondering, how this is going to play out. And it could just be a situation where Kalen DeBoer is not a good fit for Alabama. But at the same time, if you're Kalen DeBoer, how do you say no to Alabama? But here's the weird part about college football and where we're at now with this new day and age of NIL and players making money. I think schools are going to be much more reluctant now to try and buy out a coach. I think I looked up the numbers. I think the buyout number for Kalen DeBoer is like $63 million. Somewhere between $60 and $70 million to buy out Kalen DeBoer if you want to move on to a different coach. Now, keep in mind that $63 million is just for DeBoer. If you buy out DeBoer, you also have to turn around and have the funds in place for a new head coach. And if it's Alabama, they're going to hire a top-notch coach who's going to demand top dollar, and you got to pay for his staff that's coming in. That's a lot of money. All of a sudden, you're in excess of $100 million. And the problem is now these schools are stretched thin because you've got to pay your players. You need your donors to offer up big-time money for NIL to be able to have the funds in place to get the players you want, to roster build. I guess what I'm trying to say is that these schools don't have the funds in place to pay players, pay coaches, and buy out coaches if they want to make a move. When you're talking about buyout dollars being as large as $63 million. The days of what took place with Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M, those are long gone. The schools don't have those type of resources. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that Alabama, for better or worse, is stuck with Kalen DeBoer. Unless Kalen DeBoer just woke up tomorrow and said, you know what, I don't need this in my life, I'm out, and decided to step down. But, of course, he's not going to do that because why would he walk away from $63 million? He's not. He won't do it. I wouldn't do it, neither would you. But that's big-time money. But that's what these schools are facing. And that's the problem at Alabama. But it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. Because I got to tell you what, I watched Alabama play that game against Florida State. Now, clearly, they can improve and play better football. But that is not one of the best teams in the country. They don't play as hard. They don't have as much talent. They're not as intense. And they got destroyed defensively. Florida State did whatever they wanted. So I just don't see how Alabama is going to somehow turn it around to where they can be one of the top 6 to 8 teams in the country that's putting pressure on everyone else to jump into the college football playoff. I just don't think it's going to happen. And when you look at the schedule, here's the reality of what Bama's got. You lose the opener to Florida State. They have a home game against Wisconsin, but they have to go at Georgia, at Missouri, home against Tennessee, at South Carolina, home against LSU and Oklahoma, and at Auburn. That is a brutal stretch throughout the course of the season. And based on what I saw against Florida State, you trying to tell me this team is going to go unscathed the rest of the way? There's no way that's going to happen. So Alabama fan is in a very interesting spot. They want to believe they're still the best program in the country. They want to believe that they're going to be able to get on top of this. But the reality is, and I think if you take a moment to think about it, when you lose somebody like Nick Saban, you don't just reload because Nick Saban is one of one. He is he's the best coach in the history of the game, and you can't replace a guy like that. And if you do, it's going to take some time before you're able to get back to the level that you want to be. And you may never be back at that level. The run that Alabama went on with Nick Saban was once in a lifetime. It was that special. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. But for me, I think Kalen DeBoer is a great coach. I think Kalen DeBoer is a great football mind. I think he's a good guy. He just may not be the right fit at Alabama. And that's unfortunate because they're all in, right? It's quite possible that Bill Belichick may not be the right fit at North Carolina. I'm not ready to say that yet. I'm just saying that what if it doesn't work out? I mean, they're all in. They're pot committed. So we'll see. We'll see how things shake out. But from what I saw in week number 1, just general thoughts coming out of week 1. Alabama is not a legit contender for a national championship. And Georgia, not Texas, is the best team in the SEC. And there are other teams that are chasing. LSU looked really good. I mean, LSU's defense was tremendous in that win over Clemson. So credit to Brian Kelly. I don't like Brian Kelly because he's kind of douchey. And that whole fake accent thing when he arrived at LSU was really annoying. But he's a darn good football coach. And he's had great success at all of his stops. And the way LSU was able to put the clamps on and put the pressure on Clemson as that game went along was impressive. So what LSU showed me is that physically they can compete with anybody in the country. And with Nussmeier making plays at quarterback, they could be a contender in the SEC. But Georgia, we'll see with Texas. I think Texas is going to be fine. But the problem is if Arch continues to struggle as he works through his first full year as a starter, and you've got that type of schedule, Texas plays at Georgia this year. Now, that's critical. Georgia's in a very good spot. Last year, they had to make the tough trips. They went to Bama, they went to Texas, and they went to Ole Miss. This year, they get those same three teams, but all at home. And Georgia's won every home game like for the last 5 years. They don't lose at home. So I think Georgia's in a really good spot. But a lot of football is left to be played. But for Kalen DeBoer, people always ask, like, why would he leave Washington? Why do you leave Washington if you know that if you just win 9 to 10 games a year, you're going to be a legend there and they're going to love you? And I think it comes down to a couple of things. One, when Alabama comes a calling, you have to listen. And they're going to offer you more money than just about anywhere else. And you've got a chance to go and compete against the best. And the best coaches, the best athletes, they want to measure themselves against the best. They're not looking for the easiest pathway. They want to know where they stack up. And I think that's part of the reason why you take that job is because if you go into that pressure cooker in the SEC, if you can win at Bama, then you're going to make a name for yourself and you'll be considered one of the great coaches in college football because it's different in the South. It's different in the SEC. But big-time coaches, big-time athletes, they're not ordinary people like we are. They're not looking for the easiest path. And Kalen DeBoer jumped on the opportunity to coach Bama, and now he's finding out all about the pressure cooker in the SEC. It's impressive. But, man, Bama fans, they've had enough. I saw a picture online. It's probably my favorite over the weekend. Had a picture of Nick Saban and a picture of DeBoer. Under DeBoer was the new Cracker Barrel sign and logo. Under Saban was the old one. I mean, Bama fans have had it with DeBoer. They're going to lose their minds. There's an entire generation of Bama fans who don't know what losing is. Like, they've never experienced it. And then this guy comes in and they fall flat on their face and they're like, what's up with this guy DeBoer? All right, we'll keep things rolling here. Rip City Drive. Brendan Slaughter stopping by at 420 to talk Beavs. And then Alex Brink, former Coug, our college football and NFL insider, breaking down week 1 in college football at 520. You got the Rip City Drive with Chad doing on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, I'll get to Mike Gundy, his comments, and Dan Lanning's response coming up at 4 o'clock. I don't know why Coach Gundy is opening up his pie hole. It's not like Oklahoma State has been short on resources over the years when you've got T. Boone Pickens contributing hundreds of millions of dollars to the school. So I don't know what he's complaining about. And I don't know why he would want to open up his mouth before a big game at Autzen Stadium, unless he wants Dan Lanning to go crazy again in the locker room, pumping up his players like he did against Colorado a couple years ago. It's like, hey, coach, you're already up against it going to Autzen. Why are you choosing to run your mouth about the money that Oregon spends in their budget? Yeah, it's called college football. You have schools that have more resources than other schools. It's always been like that. It's always been like that. It's a little bit different now, but there's always been the haves and the have-nots. But Oklahoma State is far from a have-not. They've had plenty of help from T. Boone Pickens, and Oregon's had a ton of help from Phil Knight. I just think it's weird when you start to open up your mouth. And I remember I mentioned this before. Who's the guy with the foot fetish? Rex Ryan. Good old Rex Ryan. He's on ESPN now, but longtime coach. He was head coach of the Jets. Lo Neal told me that players love Rex Ryan. Like, he's a player's coach. Guys love to play for him. They enjoy being around him. You know, he's a funny guy, but really smart, especially when it comes to defense. Like, there's a lot of things to love about Rex Ryan, but he said the one thing that players hated about Rex is that he was always busy running his mouth and talking a bunch of ish. And he said the problem is that he would talk so much junk throughout the course of a game week that by the time Sunday rolled around, the players on Rex's team would have to go out and pay a price for all the things the coach said. It's like, hey, coach, can you please put a sock in it? We love you, and we're going to play hard for you, but we're tired of taking shots because of all the things you've said throughout the course of the week because you like to talk junk. And that's not cool because we're the ones taking the bullets for you. And so I thought that was funny that Lowe would make mention of that. But it's the same thing with Coach Gundy. He's opening up his mouth. He's upset about the disparity in cash. And now his players are going to pay a price for him running his pie hole. And with Oklahoma State, hard to see how they have a pathway to victory on Saturday. They're a younger team right now. And Coach Gundy's had tremendous success at Oklahoma State. And my dad went to Oklahoma State. He did his undergraduate and his graduate work at OSU. My parents lived in a trailer off the campus when he was still in school.